Half of Americans have stopped talking to someone about politics, and 2/3 are stifling at least some of their opinions. At the same time, it feels like a lot of people are shouting their opinions on cable news, on social media. There's a larger group who have gone silent. Both phenomena are true and understandable, and both are dangerous in different ways. I became fascinated by conflict about 5 years ago because I honestly couldn't understand how to be useful as a journalist in America anymore. I'd spent 20 years writing for national magazines. I got to interview Barack Obama and Bill Gates and travel around the world, and I'll tell you what, it was a sweet gig. I was convinced that facts were the most important currency, that they were knowable and persuasive, and if I could just dig them up and shine them and make them look pretty, they would matter. I would matter. Yeah, well, then around 2015, I had to admit that the plan wasn't working. Facts still mattered, good journalism still mattered, but it seemed much less persuasive than it had been. The places I wrote for were no longer believed to be telling the truth by about half the population. Facts mattered, but I had to admit they didn't matter as much as trust. They didn't matter as much as fear. I kept thinking about the dress. Does anyone remember this? This was an internet viral phenomenon, and looking at the same image, millions of people saw two different color patterns. Raise your hand if you see a dress that is blue and black. Okay. Now raise your hand if you see a dress that is white and gold. Okay. Interesting. No amount of argument's going to change your mind about that, right? No. Okay, well, it's blue, just for the record, but we'll move on. The truth is, and I wish I'd recognized this earlier, our perception matters more than the facts all the time. I hate that it's true, but it's especially true in conflict. So now, instead of arguing over a silly dress, people are seeing different threats, different realities. So what to do in this situation? I could keep saying, the dress is blue. I could say it in charts and graphs. I could say it on a podcast. I could say it in a haiku, but what good would it do? You heard that? I knew you'd get that. That's good. The truth is, traditional journalism just didn't have a good answer for this moment, not one that I could find. And so, I started following people who also work in intense conflict and understand it differently than journalists. Negotiators, gang violence interrupters, divorce lawyers, rabbis, ministers, ex-guerrilla fighters, recovering politicians. I even talked to astronauts because it turns out there's a lot of conflict, even in outer space, on every mission. I got 80 hours of mediation training. I started meditating, something I never thought I'd do. 5 years later, here is what I have learned. Lots of things have contributed to the political conflict we're in, many of which you've heard a lot about already. Demographic shifts, loneliness, inequality, media fragmentation, all these things cause anxiety, which makes it very easy to exploit our pre-existing divisions, including racial prejudice, our oldest fault line. And so we see politicians and companies, and yes, even countries, inflame our divisions for their own ends, and it's not hard to do. But here's something we talk less about. When conflict escalates past a certain point, the conflict itself begins to take charge. The original facts and forces that led to the dispute fade into the background. The us versus them dynamic takes over. Actual differences of opinion on policing or immigration stop mattering because the conflict takes on a life of its own. This is what's known as high conflict. It's conflict for conflict's sake. And this is the trap so many of us are in. It's very familiar, high conflict, to people who work in conflict zones around the world, but we don't talk about it enough here in the United States. High conflict can start small, but it becomes all-consuming. Our brains behave differently. We make a lot of mistakes. For example, Democrats currently believe that twice as many Republicans have extreme views than actually do. And the same is true of Republicans. Both sides dramatically overestimate how much the other side hates them. Think about how this will change your behavior. Nobody wants to elect someone who they think hates them. The most diabolical thing about high conflict is anything we do to try to end it usually makes it worse.